Hello everyone, welcome to our event. This event is brought to you by DataTalks.Club, which is a community of people who love data. We have weekly events and this is one of such events. If you want to find out more about the events we have, there is a link in the description. Go to the description, click on this link and you'll see all the events we have in our schedule. Then if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, do it now. Just click on the subscribe button and then you will see all our videos that we have in our YouTube channel. Then we have an amazing Slack community. It's also important that you join. There you can hang out with other data enthusiasts, ask questions, help others. It's an amazing place, check it out. And then finally, on Monday, we start a course about MLOps. So it's called MLOps Zoomcamp. It's completely free. Check it out. There is also a link in the description. Register. We start on Monday. So it's going to be awesome. If you're into machine learning, data science, and you're interested in the engineering component of that, check it out. And during today's interview, you can ask any question you want. There is a link in the live chat. It's pinned. Click on this link and ask your question. And I will be covering these questions during the interview today. Okay, I think that's all the slides I have. And now I just need to open the document with questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so let's start. This week we'll talk about machine learning in marketing, and we have a special guest today, Juan. Juan is a Berlin-based mathematician and data scientist. He is interested in statistical learning, time series analysis, Bayesian and geometric methods in data analysis. Welcome, Juan.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. And yeah, thank you again for the invitation.
So you recently gave a talk at PyData Berlin, and I thought that the talk is amazing. I unfortunately I wasn't able to attend the talk because they didn't let me in. The talk was already full, so the room was full. I couldn't get in, but I really wanted to talk to you, to invite you here. So thanks a lot for agreeing. And this is an amazing topic. I'm very happy to talk about this topic with you today. But before we go into main topic, which is machine learning in marketing, let's start with your background. Can you tell us about your career journey so far?
Yeah, of course. Before I jump in, I just wanted to say that the video of the PyData talk is live. So if you want to check it out, it's online already. Yeah, so I'm originally from Colombia. I came to Berlin around 10 years ago to pursue my studies in mathematics. So I joined Humboldt University. So I did my master and PhD in an area which has actually nothing to do with data science per se. So it was on kind of geometric analysis, which was very interesting. It's something that I wanted to do just for the sake of doing research, especially because I really like geometry. But yeah, after doing some time in academia, I decided to do something else. And kind of my first position, about data, was at TD Reply, which is a marketing consultancy. And it was quite nice because this kind of first experience exposed me to different type of projects and clients in various industries, and also give me kind of the business point of view. And because again, data scientist is not just math and code, but it's about how to make this useful for people to improve their businesses. And that was quite fun. That took almost 3 years, but then I decided to move it to a product company because we were essentially doing kind of the more risky projects or the proof of concept for the clients, and then we'll deliver that for in-house development. But I was kind of missing this product development part, and that's why I joined HelloFresh. I was, as probably we'll talk in a bit, doing my experience at TD. I did a lot of time series analysis. So what I joined HelloFresh to support the forecasting team. And that was quite fun, especially because it happened during COVID. So doing forecasting during COVID time was definitely challenging, definitely interesting. We couldn't, of course, rely on standard methods. So a lot of kind of new techniques and kind of tricks had to be applied. But after that, I really wanted to come back to marketing. Now, again, from a product perspective. And yeah, since around 8 or 9 months, I'm working at Vault, where I'm part of the marketing tech team. Yeah, kind of leading the data science projects in the marketing domain.
Can you tell us a few words about geometric analysis? What is that?
Yeah, sure. So geometric analysis, it's try to understand kind of topological invariance of kind of twisted surfaces. I was especially working with surfaces with corners, so to say. But if you see the surface, you can see, for example, if they have corners, if they have holes. But if you have this in, let's say, very high up dimensions, you cannot properly see that. And you want to detect this through integrals or through kind of matrices. So I think one of the ways of understanding it is as Kak said, that you want, like, can you hear the shape of a drum? And what he meant is, like, if I give you an operator on a manifold and I compute kind of the eigenvalues, the spectrum, can I detect some geometry? And you can partially detect that. So if you take these eigenvalues, you can see, for example, what's the dimension or like the volume. And yeah, and that's this game to try to detect global properties through kind of more analytical methods.
Quite unrelated to marketing, isn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, the core is linear algebra. So linear algebra is definitely a core part of both worlds, so to say.
Yeah, I know this talk is about marketing, but I'm just curious, are there applications in like day-to-day of people, like of the geometric analysis? Like, can we see as usual people applications of this somewhere?
I think, as I said, like the core components, essentially linear algebra is always there. Something where I'm kind of particularly interested is in this Bayesian inference approach and these kind of samplers, to get kind of samples from the posterior distribution actually rely a lot on geometric properties. So actually there are people which did kind of design these samplers based on geometry. And it's been quite fun to see how, like, all of these techniques of Riemannian geometry and Hamiltonian dynamics can be or are the kind of tool to create these samplers. So it's kind of a far connection, but it exists, and it's very interesting.
Interesting. I did not know about that. Not that I know much about Bayesian inference anyways, but I also didn't know that there is any connection to geometry there. But yeah. Let's go back to marketing. So hopefully I do know a few things there. Not a lot, that's why we have you here. So maybe can you tell us what are the typical problems that we solve with machine learning in marketing?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question because there's by no means a kind of a complete answer that I can give, just because there are many kind of subfields. So on the one hand side, like, I guess the most common one to think is about how to optimize media spend. So to do better targeting to users. So of course you want to see which targets to users and kind of send personalized message and so on. You also want to prevent a churn. And for that, of course, you have historical data, and you probably have some early or like regressors that could be early predictor for that. And then you want to take action upon these results. But you can also do things, for example, using NLP and text mining through social listening. And that's something that I did in the past. Was try to see, let's say, how people talk about your brand or about certain campaign in social media, and to see what's the sentiment, what are the subtopics, and actually if the campaign intention was actually reflected of how people comment on that. So it's quite huge. So maybe a couple of them which I've been working at the moment are on the one hand side, as I said, on the user acquisition side, which is how to better use our money, so to say, to efficiently push our marketing activities. And that is somehow related, of course, with attribution model. You want to understand the kind of flow, how kind of your EU that spend, how does this work to bring new customers? And on the, let's say, other part, you have retention, right? So once you have your customers, you want to make sure that they're engaged with the product. And for that, we can do, churn prevention model, or as I talked on the PyData talk, uplift modeling to actually not just prevent prediction, but actually prevent through a kind of tailored incentives.
So the main ones are, as you said, user acquisition is we want to get new users, and then once we got the users, we want to keep them, right? Or detect that if they're about to leave us and somehow prevent this. And the talk that you gave was about detecting this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And attribution model, you mentioned this. So as I understand, so when we try to acquire a user, there are multiple ways of doing this. We can, I don't know, show a, I don't know, a commercial on TV, then we can put a banner on the street, or we can, I don't know, go to Facebook and show an ad there. There are many different options, right? And the goal of attribution models is to understand how effective each channel is, or a user came into our platform, where did this person come from, right?
Yeah, and I think yeah, kind of there are two parts. So on the attribution side, you want to kind of, so you spend some euro in different kind of parts. Let's say it could be a TV ad or a Facebook ad, and then someone registered, right? So the first thing is to connect, let's say, how or like what was the incentive or like trigger for this user to come in. And of course, it's not unique. And that's the fun part, so to say, because if you see a TV campaign, you'll probably won't react immediately, but maybe you, after a while, maybe that same day, you will Google for that. And then, let's say, through the digital kind of tracking, then you could, let's say, in principle, attribute that to Google. But then this will underestimate the effect of TV. So in the attribution part, which is also connected to measurement, you want to detect this connection. After you have done so, let's say, based on certain assumptions, then you want to optimize that because let's say you cannot simply keep pushing, let's say, money or like putting money in the same marketing channels because they saturate, right? We have seen that in practice, because otherwise the strategy would be super simple. You just keep pushing money and grow your company. But we know that this doesn't work like this. So yeah, it's a little bit in that direction.
So you say if I start advertising now something on Facebook in a month, I will see fewer users coming in from Facebook, right? And then I need to go to a different channel.
Yeah, I mean, especially because let's say there's an audience that is available on Facebook. So, I mean, you can try to reach them, but at some point, kind of the efficiency of each euro that you put on this channel is not going to increase. Usually, it just saturates. But of course, there are many components there. So time, as we'll see, like if you do it close to Christmas or close to like summer, this also makes a huge impact. So it's not just the euro per se, but also kind of interaction of many features.
And I'm especially curious about TV. So you said maybe you run a commercial on TV, but then so users see the brand, right? So they maybe recognize the brand, and then the next time they Google something and they see, like I don't know, food delivery, right? And then they see Volt and they click on this. So how do you know that this user actually first learned about you through TV and not through Google?
Yeah, this is a tough problem.
Is it even possible?
Yeah, I mean, there are kind of so statistical technique to try to infer that. So actually, this is connected to what is called media mix model. So, I mean, let me take a step back. So before we have all of the cookies and tracking, actually marketers use these statistical models to try to estimate this uplift, let's say at channel level. Then kind of all the cookie industry came in, you had kind of semi-deterministic tracking for users, so that kind of stay away a bit. But I mean, TV is a channel on which many companies just spend a lot of money. And sometimes they don't know, that, let's say, what's the efficiency, they just know the work. So now that new privacy measures are coming, like for example, the iOS change in iOS 14.5, then all of these methods are coming back to life and they can work pretty well. But of course, there are statistical methods. So say it's hard to say if they work, let's say, perfectly. I guess one of the main tools for that is, of course, A/B testing or geolocation experiments. Yeah, but we can talk about the details later. But it's possible through kind of statistical methods to measure this uplift. Yeah.
And what is uplift in this case?
Yeah.
What do we actually measure?
So, I mean, there are kind of two ways of doing this. So, and let's say levels. So you can do that as, let's say, holistically, because the marketing kind of funnel is rather complex. And in this case, what you do is a regression model. And that's kind of the core of a media mix model on which you put a target variable, let's say conversions, and you will try to explain that through all channels as external regressors. The tricky part is that if you put the raw data as it is, it'll probably not work for TV and for other channels as well, because there are kind of two effects that let's say get mixed in this kind of regression-like relation. On the one hand side, there's a saturation effect, which means that, again, what we talked about, that it's not linear, so it's not really a correlation that you're trying to make or to find. And in addition, there's a carryover effect. And a carryover effect means you measure something, you show an ad today, and probably not all people that saw the ad will react on the same day, but on the week later, so to say. So in these media mix models, what you want to do is to couple saturation transformations and these carryover effects, which are sometimes called ad stock transformations, and put that into the mix in this kind of regression kind of setting. And of course, you can control for seasonality. You can go fancy and go with time varying coefficients, because the efficiency of marketing can change over time. But that's kind of more on the holistic level. And here, by uplift, coming back to your question, it's really the kind of the coefficient of this regression. Whereas if you want to do this at campaign level, where maybe you don't have, let's say, all of this data, all of this mix, but you want to kind of detect an uplift, then you can go through a slightly different approach, which is the so-called causal impact. And what you do is you train a time series model of your KPI of interest, let's say conversions, by controlling by seasonality and maybe other regressors, other type of media spend. And then you generate a prediction, assuming that there was no campaign. And then you have the true values of your KPI. And then you would attribute this uplift. Again, this is a big if the only difference between, or like in that period, was the TV campaign.
Mm-hmm. So maybe I didn't understand it, just to make sure I did. So uplift in the first case, when we just look at the contribution of each of the channels. So we have a regression model. So the target variable here is conversion. So somebody, let's say, registered in an app or somewhere, or downloaded an app, some action, right? So let's say registration. And then there are multiple channels that led to these registrations. So first, the user could see an ad on TV, then maybe they could hear this in radio, maybe, or in Google or in Facebook, or well, there could be many channels, right? So you have all these channels. So they are the features, the regressors in this model, and then the target is 1 if the user converted, right? And then you train this model, and then you look at the coefficients and you see, okay, for TV, the coefficient is, so this gives you kind of contribution of each of the channels to the conversion. And then you see, okay, for TV, the coefficient is 2 times more than, let's say, for radio, right? And then you see, okay, TV must be 2 times more important, more effective.
Yeah, in a sense, I think that's the core. There are two kind of things that I would like to add. On the one hand side is that the raw kind of impressions data or cost data that you put into the model, again, would not be enough. So you need to put this saturation and ad stock effect, which actually have some hyperparameters that you will learn from the data. So you will actually like to learn from the data when this channel saturates. And the other is that in these media mix models, as you said, there are direct and indirect effects. So what you usually do is not have just one regression model, but to have a couple of them to model different touch points. So if your target variable is conversions, then you have a model where TV is included, but then you have yet another regression model on which your target variable is, let's say, Google search. And then you have TV as a regressor for that. And then you do kind of an average to see the combined effect. So it's actually a sequence of regression models.
And another thing I'm really curious about. So when it comes to Google or Facebook, you have tracking, you know that this user came from this channel. But in term, like when it comes to TV, you don't really know about that. So do you have another model that predicts if this user was exposed to a TV commercial, or how does it
Yeah,
work?
you don't do this at user level, but you usually aggregate at daily or
Mhm.
weekly granularity. So you have kind of a pool of like all of the users are aggregated. An agency that manage TV data, they can give you cost, which is how many they spend, and also they have to like a way of estimating the audience, which would be the impressions.
Mhm. Okay.
So this is what you actually use. So it's a time series model, so to say. So time is component, a component is important, and you have weekly or daily granularity.
So it's called media mix model, right?
Yeah,
And then you mentioned that so we have all these things that track us. So every time we click on an ad, our cookie or some identifier of us, of each of us, is somehow saved in the system, right? And we have access to this. But you mentioned that there is a change in the in some privacy regulations that it's coming soon. And my understanding is that this kind of tracking will not be possible in the future, right?
yeah, and actually it happened. Actually, I think it was last year on the iOS
Ah,
14.5, for
okay.
example, where you can actually in your iPhone you can actually refuse to share that data with Google. With Apple. So what Apple actually report is not at user level, but at like an aggregate report. So in that regard, like these type of statistical models are not truly affected by this. And I believe that this is going to continue happening. Like privacy is going to make that these statistical models which work on aggregate data will be the tools that marketers will need to use, because the deterministic way it's probably not going to work anymore.
Mm. But you still will know if somebody came from Facebook or not. You just don't know maybe if this user maybe visited some other website, right? You still
Even
have
I
this
think
information.
you don't know, like you know the aggregate number. So but you
Mhm.
cannot identify the user. Like you can say, like the report would say, okay, 10 users came from iOS, but you don't know which ones.
Mhm. Okay, okay. That so then it makes the modeling more complex, right?
Yeah, yeah. But again, if you think about TV, you don't have that either. So that's why you want
Mhm.
to, and this is the key component. Again, I think the media mix model is not really about the model. It is, but it's really about which data can you find. Because, like say, already finding good TV spend data, it's like you need to have a common granularity, and that's a big part of the project, the data collection.
Mhm. Okay, so we do this, we understand how each marketing channel or how effective each marketing channel, and then we can decide to spend some time or some money in this channel. Then we also should keep in mind the saturation, as you mentioned, right? And then another area was optimizing how much money we spent on each, on like what are
Yeah.
the budgets, right? And then we acquired the user. And now our goal is to try to keep this user as long as possible in our application or on our website. So what are the things, what are the models, or what are the problems we're solving there when it comes to retention?
Yeah, so in retention, actually, it depends on the type of business. If you have like a contract-based business, then kind of you have a well-defined notion of churn. And then typically this is a classification problem on which you have certain features uh, that will probably explain or like indicate uh, why this user churn. And if you think about a classification model that outputs up, let's say, a number between 0 and 1, then you can run that on a new customer base, and you set a threshold and say, okay, if it's more than 0.7, I will send an email, something like that. This is kind of a very high level view. In other businesses, like for example, Volt, there's no kind of definition of churn, because you could like order today or order and order tomorrow, but then go for vacations for a month. That doesn't mean you're churn. That is mean that you're probably just not active. So in this case, there are other type of techniques. There are many of them, some techniques that I've been recently looking into are this more kind of a probabilistic type of model on which you try to simulate this kind of non-contractual behavior and try to estimate the probability of being active as a function of time. So it's not a typical classification problem, but again, that depends on the business model.
And I guess here you cannot, there is no definition of churn because let's say it's an app, right? Or it's a registration. So unless a user deletes their account, you don't know whether they deleted an app or just stopped using it.
Exactly.
Right. Because you cannot track deletion, right?
Yeah, but also by that time it's already too late. So just to give you an example, the whole idea is to model the purchase frequency. So there are customers, for example, that order every Sunday, and customers that order every day. So if the customer that orders every day stops for 4 days, there's probably something wrong, and you probably want to react. That's an example. But if a customer that just orders every Sunday stops for 4 days, it's the usual, it's expected. It's going to be more concerned if this user doesn't order in a month, so to say. So it's still try to find this kind of sweet point on which you expect, like there's something weird from the user pattern. And of course, you want to learn this from historical data.
Well, I am from a different category of users. So I order when I just feel like it, when I don't feel like cooking. So there is no really pattern into that. One day I might order, then maybe I will order next day, but then maybe for a month or two I will not order anything. But then because let's say when I go to work, I will want to eat out, but then I'm lazy or I have a meeting, so then I just again order, right? So you described users who order every Sunday, you described users who order every day, and then there are people like me who sometimes order. So how do you have like a different approach to each of these segments of users?
Yeah, of course, you will have to have external regressors. So for example, I would imagine that you order more in winter than in summer.
Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe you are...
I haven't collected data.
Maybe just because let's say you're less kind of incentivized to go outside, and maybe just cold and you order more. It depends, yeah. So I mean, I'm just trying to tease the fact that you can, of course, add seasonality features. It depends on the customer as well. So again, as you will do in a churn-like problem where you have like a binary variable, you will try to see from kind of a lookalike approach if you could detect some signal. Of course, it's never going to be perfect, but it's at least something to make sure that we target the right users at the right time. You, of course, don't want to get emails every day. It's super annoying.
And practically, how is it implemented? Like, do you have a different model for each segment, or you have one model for all the users, or or it's too business specific that like every business needs to do it differently?
I think it depends on the business, but you can think about this still as a regression-like problem on where you can just add external regressors into that. So just the output probability, so to say, would be a function of this, for example, segment or external regressors.
And then usually in this case, let's say you detect that this user is about to churn, so I use a different app. I will not say which app it is, but I used to use it, but then I stopped because there is a competitor that I like more, and they started sending me pushes. So they detected that I'm not active, and these pushes are so annoying that I just want to delete the app. So I guess my question is, like, do you also need to take this into account, the cost of push? Because maybe I didn't delete the app yet, but with a push you kind of annoy me, so I go and delete it.
Yeah, I'm also very annoyed by this email. So I think these are kind of two different problems in the sense that on the one hand side, you want to have a model that kind of predicts the probability that you're active, but then you need to do something else to efficiently target the users that you can actually recover, so to say, because if you are gone, like you're gone, like why if need to waste, so to say, money by sending you emails if that costs, right? So in that regard, this is where uplift modeling comes in, on which you really want to learn which users are the ones which are kind of useful to target, again, based on historical data. And yeah, that's why I presented by data. And this should be kind of built on top of the churn prediction, because again, we don't want just to predict, but we just want to prevent. And of course, the output rate, it's something that companies have to take into consideration, because like the strategy of just sending emails and hope it works, it's a little bit too naive.
Mm-hmm. So you also need to be selective. If model says this user is not active anymore, then you need to see, okay, how hopeless is this user, right? If the user is hopeless, you don't bother, right? Because the user is gone, long gone.
Yeah, exactly.
And like the factors, I guess, you use here is like how often the user uses this app, right? And what kind of patterns there are.
But also these uplift models actually need kind of an A/B test. So what you actually need to, like the training data of this uplift modeling actually are coming from a stress control split. So you do this stress control split, then you measure kind of the uplift, and then you try to detect signals on which, okay, because the problem is that you cannot send and not send an email to an user. That's what you would ideally like to measure, but you cannot. So what you try to do is to find similar users, such as that in the control group, you don't send anything, and in treatment you send, and then by comparing the uplift of these two, you can estimate. So if one of them with the treatment did convert again, then you know that this type of users are the ones that you probably want to target. But if they didn't, for example, like that's yet a hint that the uplift model will have to say, okay, maybe this type of users based on external features is not the one that you want to target.
And practically, I guess you take all your user base, you somehow cluster them, segment them, right? And then in each segment, you split them into two groups, A and B. And then you think, okay, like let's take this segment, and then we will send a push or an email to this group, and we will not send anything, and we will see how many of them will actually return, right? And then this is how you measure the effectiveness of the. Oh, got it.
But in real life, I just wanted to say that in real life, the data collection, it's, I think, the most challenging part, to be completely honest with you, because I mean, the models are kind of classical machine learning model, but of course, kind of marketing department would like to just push a lot and to do these control experiments in a way that you know that the only thing that is different is the treatment. It's hard, right? You don't want to have compounder effects like, I don't know, like different regions, for example, or something weird happening in a city and another thing didn't happen in that city. So it's tricky.
And you said marketing is pushing, so marketing wants to send emails to everyone. So why do you bother like splitting with A and B, just send to everyone and see?
I'm just saying that doing experiment it's a commitment that everyone should have in the company, right? It's not like the kind of crazy data scientists trying to do it, but really like to sync. Or for example, also we need to make sure that the treatments that we send in the training phase are actually going to be consistent in the future, right? Because if in my training period I send an incentive without a voucher, and in my, let's say, test, or let's say in my life experiment where I'm going to apply that, I applied voucher, so then it's not really that consistent, right?
And then I guess you can also take a segment, and your A/B test would be to one group you send an email with a voucher, to another you send without a voucher, and then because sending a voucher also has some cost, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you see like how much actually in each segment, how much revenue it at the end generates, right? So does it make sense to send vouchers, or maybe how large the voucher should be?
Yeah, and I think just to make it even harder, let's say you want to optimize for kind of long-term retention, because if you offer a voucher and this person uses the voucher and then doesn't come again, I mean, again, it's debatable. Like it's a big question whether this was useful or not, right? You really want to make sure that there's a long-term engagement and not like a short-term effect just driven by incentives.
But also, there could be long-term engagement driven by incentives. So there is an app that I use for fast grocery delivery. The only reason I use is because there is free delivery and they give like 10 euros discount when it's over a certain threshold. The moment they stop doing this, I'll just go to a different app.
It's yeah. As in every problem is really trying to understand the customers that you have, and that's this diversity makes everything trickier but fun.
Yeah, we have an interesting question. Which approach is more efficient, statistical approach or machine learning?
I mean, I don't have kind of a clear difference between these two. I would say you should always go with a baseline, which is maybe not neither of those, and to have that as a benchmark. So I wouldn't jump into these kind of techniques unless it's necessary, because these problems are surprisingly hard, and if you have the right data, you might actually go away with it with a simple kind of rule. Things become a little bit more complex if you don't have the data available. So yeah, keep it simple.
So what could be a good baseline, good benchmark for churn prediction?
Like, for example, if they were active last week or not.
Okay, that's pretty simple, right?
Yeah, I mean, and whatever you do, this is just the first example that came into my mind. It has to beat that, because if not, then just use that.
What do you think are the differences? Because I'm not completely sure. Like, what are the differences here between statistical and machine learning approaches? To me, they look kind of the same. I guess maybe machine learning is like when you train XGBoost, and statistics is when you train linear regression. Or it's
but again,
about tests.
I don't know. Like, I don't have a strong opinions. Like, for me, it's just kind of methods to solve a specific problem. I do believe that, for example, in this media mix model, it's really about doing a very good linear regression, and that's in practice hard, actually.
Yeah, we have a question about this MMM model. I think it's media mix model, right? So how often do you retrain these MMM models? And are there any significant gains in performance if you, let's say, retrain them weekly?
I mean, usually, if you think about measuring offline campaigns, you don't have this every week or every day. So probably what you typically do is to have a good baseline, and maybe do it maybe every month or every 2 months. That depends on the data granularity, because of course the digital channels will keep going, but kind of the strategy are often to just go on and off, because this is quite expensive. So of course, we really try to automate as much as possible, like data transformation, data collection, and things like this. But with kind of retraining on a daily level is not going to bring any value.
Yeah, and we talked about a good baseline for churn prediction. Well, what are good baselines here for this for attribution models?
I mean, again, this is really about the data that we have, because attribution, like in ideally, attribution models, let's say, would be deterministic, and you shouldn't have to model anything. But for example, in the iOS case, if you really want to attribute that at user level, there should be a way of splitting this kind of report into individual users. So I guess, say, the easiest one is just, I don't know, to uniformly distribute that. But I guess there are other better methods, maybe in like using lookalike approaches to do so.
Uniformly, you mean you just assume that every channel is
like if you have that's a little bit tricky. Actually, it's not that simple. But in an ideal case, you know that, for example, the report, you say, okay, there are 100 users, and then you have a way of detecting. You don't have per se which one they are, but then you have a subset of which 100 are coming from this channel and 100 from this other, and then you don't know which one, so then you kind of randomly assign, just so that the report makes sense. But of course, you cannot trace that back. It's tricky.
And then there is another question from Sibasis about probably also this MMM model, or it's related to this saturation, I think. So the question is, how do you choose the decay rate for each channels, and what's the approach you follow?
Yeah, so actually you don't need to choose that. You will actually learn it from the data. The techniques that you're using to be more concrete is kind of this Bayesian linear regression. And again, these Bayesian approaches allows you to plug these type of transformations in a nice way, and you can actually learn that from the data. And the challenge, of course, is that you might not have enough data, or like you could over-parameterize your model just because you don't have enough data points. And this is where this kind of Bayesian techniques on which you use the priors to shrink the coefficient, so to say, based on, I don't know, domain knowledge, for example, or certain heuristics can help you a lot. So ideally, you could learn this from the data.
Okay. Is there any good resource on learning all these things? So we talked about media mix model. We learned about this technique that you just mentioned, Bayesian linear regressions, uplift modeling, churn prediction. Is there a good book or a course or something that talks in details about all these methods, machine learning methods, or in general, like data methods in marketing?
I mean, I guess there are many resources online. I should say that they're kind of all over the place. So just as a little disclaimer, I have myself a little blog on which I try to kind of run some simulations. So that could be maybe a nice place to start. But there are many blogs online about this subject. I have found a kind of a conceptually interesting book that is called Introduction to Algorithmic Marketing. And actually it's available online. And it gives a very nice overview of kind of the marketing domain, talked about customer lifetime value, this efficiency measurement through MMM, and they go beyond. And they have a nice GitHub repo on which they also have some experiments. So I found that reference quite interesting.
Yeah, thank you. I see a question from Amin. We talked about Bayesian linear regression, and the question from Amin is, do you use Bayesian approach for building your statistical models, or you're more into the frequentist approach?
So I really like the Bayesian approach because on the one hand side, at least for me, it's easier to understand. It's a little bit more transparent. So there's no like, I know p-values can be understood, but I just find it's a little bit more transparent. And actually it gives a lot of flexibility. So again, as I mentioned before, you can also, of course, try to do this with maximum likelihood estimation. But the fact that you can encode business knowledge in your priors, it's something that comes very handy if you have small data. So it's just a very convenient approach. And yeah, I'm very, I use it, but not just because it's fun or cool, but it's just because in some situations it does show a big advantage in this specific statistical methods.
You probably talk often or sometimes to your colleagues who from other companies who also work on marketing. Do you see any preference from your colleagues towards Bayesian methods in general, or it's like 50-50, or maybe frequentist is more popular usually?
I think people working on MMMs, on marketing mix model, I think most of them work with Bayesian methods, just because again, it's about the flexibility it provides. So in that regard, I think it's very popular. But for other applications, for example, like for churn prevention, so to say, I guess in this case, you'll probably try to use a maximum likelihood estimation or a kind of classical machine learning model, just because you really want to aim for accuracy, and also the scale and the data set are typically much bigger.
Mm-hmm. So I guess when explainability and ability to embed to use the business knowledge is more important, then you go with Bayesian. But when you care more about accuracy, then you go with, I don't know, XGBoost or something. And
Yeah, I still believe, for example, that again, this is some kind of early experiments that I've been doing. But for example, one of the kind of benefits of Bayesian modeling as well is that you can have this hierarchical structure, and in some sense allows you to solve the cluster problem. So what happens if you have a new cohort? You're doing that at cohort level, and you can pull information across categories. So in this case, actually, I think even if you're just interested about prediction or accuracy, could be actually very useful. So again, the problem is about kind of speed and performance, but I think the people working in probabilistic programming are really working hard and making a great progress on scaling these methods so that they are kind of run more efficiently.
And finally, you said that Bayesian approach is easier to understand, but you probably mean like it's easier to understand the output and then explain it, right? Because to me, every time I try to understand how Bayesian methods work, I see integrals all over the place and I have some mental block in my head because I didn't study geometric analysis maybe, or maybe it was for some other reason. But to me, these Bayesian methods, they're more complex. If I really want to understand how they work, then I need to go through all this mathematics. And yeah, that's why maybe I'm not into Bayesian methods much, simply because I don't understand how they work. And to understand,
I totally
I
get
need
it.
to,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I don't think actually it's the fact that like like you definitely don't need a PhD in geometric analysis to understand. It's I think the approach, and I need to be very honest. There's a great reference, and it's a book. It's called Statistical Rethinking, and the
Rethinking.
rethinking, yeah. Uh, the author of this book provides online lectures online, and it's a beautiful book just because it gives you the like it's a very complete book on Bayesian analysis where you don't see an integral. It's just intuition and simulations. And it's really beautiful, and I strongly recommend. And I honestly, I read through the math, I read through the integrals, but it was just by going through this specific book and a series of lectures where I grasped this, and then everything became quite transparent. So it's quite kind of popular among Bayesian kind of practitioners. It's a book that I strongly recommend.
I also heard about another book, I think it's called Think Bias. It's also, I think I attempted to read it. I don't remember a lot of formulas there. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, I've heard, but let's say statistical rethinking this book kept me busy for a year.
Mm-hmm.
So I bet everything on it, but of course there are many other references. But yeah, try it out and let me know because it's really pleasant to read. And if you don't have maybe the time, because I didn't have the time at that moment, also to go through the lectures, it's also quite insightful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I see we don't have a lot of time left, but there is a question I really wanted to ask you. Let's say I work at a startup and we just started building a team. Like there is some product, we have a brand, but we don't have a marketing department yet. And we want to start doing this. And we want to start, well, maybe there is a person who runs some campaigns on Facebook, but we're mostly in the dark. And now we heard, maybe from this talk or some other talk, that data science is helpful, machine learning is helpful for marketing, and we want to start doing this. So what would you suggest? How should we approach doing this?
Yeah, so of course there's a like there should be a business problem, of course, and I guess the problem is clear. Like you want to be more efficient with respect to the marketing spend,
Mm-hmm.
and everything I talked today, it's let's say relies on a good data foundation. So collect like you have different channels. You have Facebook API, you have Google, and you have different formats, different granularities. I would strongly recommend to devote some time before jumping into any modeling to structure the data by just doing data integrations from, for example, the API, designing a data model, in the sense of data warehousing and making sure that the data quality is good enough, so to say, because of course it's never going to be perfect. And just by doing this and looking to the data, kind of the data should guide the models and the techniques to be used. Because again, yeah, without data, it's really, really hard. So spend some time building up the marketing tech infrastructure to have reliable data.
So from what I understood, so we shouldn't think about, oh, let's hire data scientists and let them data scientists figure out how to best spend our marketing money. First, we should invest in infrastructure, which means hiring a data engineer, I guess, and a data analyst, right? Who would work together. So the data engineer would build the foundation, and then analyst would actually look at the data and try to make sense of this data. Maybe it could be even marketing analysts, right? So analysts who specializes in marketing, and then together they will build the foundation. They will understand how things work, and so let's say we have that. So what would be the next steps? Are we ready to bring in a data scientist or not yet?
I mean, this is a little bit fuzzy, this definition, because the person, if there was an analyst working in this type of data integration and KPI modeling, I'm pretty sure that person can definitely do some of the fundamentals of the problems that I described. Because again, I don't think, like, there's is of course, but if that person already exists in the company, they will probably do a much better job starting with the baseline model than some external kind of data scientists just trying to get cool models into a new data source. So it's really like there's a lot of domain knowledge here. And just to give you a concrete example, I work in a kind of truly cross-functional team, and I need to work closely with the engineers and data and data analysts. So because the media mix model, it connects with the attribution, and then we need to refine our attribution model and redefine the KPI that we want to model. So yeah, in a nutshell, it's not that there's a specific point in time where you need to bring a PhD with geometric analysis. It's by no means necessary. I think just by having the good data kind of foundation, domain knowledge, and a little bit of kind of statistics and linear algebra, you can actually do a lot of interesting things.
So I guess the most important thing here is domain knowledge, right? Which trumps everything else. And a good analyst who knows data well probably can pull together a Python script for doing simple modeling, right?
Yeah, because of course, if you want to productionize this, let's say you want to deploy a churn model, you probably need a little bit more help to who is going to set up your, let's say, Airflow server, who is going to maintain that, and so on, and that becomes a little bit more tricky. But at least in a very, very early stage, you really need to stop going blind in your marketing spend, but maybe try to start with some reporting and some common sense, so to say.
So I guess if we want to have, well, not data science, but in general, if we want to start this marketing function in our data organization, we need to start, probably the first good use case would be to spend our money on marketing better, more effective, right? Be more effective in spending. That could be a good use case. And these are the methods that we talked about, like about attribution, right? So let's say we want to acquire as many users as possible. So what is the most effective channel, right? Where we should put more money. And then we also should keep in mind, like all the things you mentioned about channel saturation.
Yeah, maybe, and something to add on top of that is that it's also key to define which are the KPIs which I care about, right? Because optimize with respect to that, like, is it conversion? Is it kind of which type of conversion? Like, because you can kind of register today and use the app today, or in 7 days, or do you care more of the short term? So defining what you want to optimize for by looking to the data that you have in place, it's also an important step. Like, really to see what do you want to improve.
Okay, yeah, interesting. And how do we decide if retention is more important than user acquisition, or who makes these decisions?
Yeah, I think this is really strategic, and I think it shouldn't be just like, there should be a vision, right? There's of course value in acquiring customers. But something that I truly believe is that no matter what you do marketing-wise, if your product is not solving or like helping users, you're just kind of burning money. So like it's important to focus in marketing, but I think it's also key to make sure that the product is actually going to be the best tool, because as you said, it's really about the product that drives who is going to join and if you're going to be engaged. Because no matter how many emails I send you or vouchers, if the product is bad and it's buggy, you're probably not going to use it. So yeah, focus on product development, I would say as well.
So retention in this case is not only having a good churn model, but also having a good product, right? So that people want to use, right? And
Exactly.
if it's buggy, if it crashes, then yeah.
Exactly.
So in your opinion, what are the most challenging problems in marketing?
I think, as I told you, there are many. Something that I keep thinking about and reading a lot about, it's about offline channels and media efficiency. I think these models are in kind of paper quite good and they work beautifully in simulations. But when you need to put this into practice, this is quite challenging. It's quite fun because it's hard to find a template on which you can just run it, because it really depends on the data, and often you don't have data available, so you need to find like proxies, or like maybe try to do an experiment, or maybe use previous experiments to adjust your priors. So it's definitely a field which I believe it requires a lot of kind of creativity, and it's less about because, to be completely honest, I'm not really kind of driven by training fancy models or like on like super big models that require a lot of computational power. For me, it's about kind of solving these problems that require kind of new ideas, right? So if it's not going to be a Bayesian regression, okay, what do I need? And I think still there's a lot of room for new techniques to optimize media spend.
How do you think it is important to know marketing for data scientists if somebody wants to work in marketing? And by marketing, I think like we talked about different terms like funnels, conversions, like there are some metrics that CTR, CVR, like all these things. And I guess for somebody who wants to go into marketing and hears all these abbreviations, all these words, can be quite challenging, right? So how, in your opinion, is the main knowledge of marketing important?
Yeah, so this is something that I had to learn by heart, so to say, but the marketing managers are your best allies. So I assure you that even if you have good data and if you have a good knowledge of machine learning, if you're working by yourself without talking with the marketing department, the marketing manager, the project's going to fail, because needs change, requirements change, and it's really about the strategy and the plan, right? So what if you optimize for a channel that they are going to stop using? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So it can be a little bit tricky, but the marketing team, they are your stakeholders, and you need to have like a very transparent and continuous communication, and it could be quite fun, and they have a lot of knowledge that your model actually wants. So it's super important. And actually, for me, coming from academia, I was a little bit bored about just talking with mathematicians. So also talking with people from different backgrounds makes things a little bit more fun.
Yeah, thank you. So there is a question about your blog, and I did a quick Google search. So the blog is Orduz.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cannot pronounce it.
It's
.github. Yeah, please say it. It's better if you
Juanito Orduz at .github.com. I can share it on Twitter as well. I can share it with you.
.io, I think.
.io, yeah, sorry.
I just shared the link. We will also include the link in the description. I think you also mentioned some of the resources, like some books. First one was Introduction to Statistical. to marketing, to algorithmic marketing, right?
Marketing,
The other one was statistic. It's something related with rethinking,
Statistical rethinking.
Statistical rethinking. Did you recommend anything else?
There are many resources online. There's a very nice talk. Let me try to look at, and it was a Pi data talk, and it was about churn prevention. I can share that
your
with
talk?
You. No. It was churn prevention. It's more like a holistic point of view of how like going from churn, uplift, and optimization. I can check it out, but it was, I think, yeah, Pi data 19 somewhere. But if you put churn prevention Pi data 2019, you'll probably find it.
Yeah, maybe if you find it later, send us a link and we'll include this. So, what's the best way to find you on the internet?
You can find me on
the blog, right?
the blog, and you can also find me on GitHub. You can find my email quite easily. So if you ever have a question or anything related to this or other topics around data science, just drop me a line.
And Twitter, I guess, also.
Yeah, and Twitter as well.
Way to find you. Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for sharing your experience with us, for telling about marketing. And thanks everyone as well for joining us today, for asking questions, or watching us. Yeah, I guess that's all from us today. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, have a great weekend.